So we are live. Good evening and a very warm welcome to of Narratives. We are very happy to have Sayantani Adhikary today. She will be speaking on Brawn and the Bhadromahila, Time, Sarala Debi, and Ila Mitra. Before she starts a very formal introduction, Sayantani Adhikary is an assistant professor of history at Sadhan Chandra Mahavidyalaya. She is also pursuing her PhD research as an independent researcher. Her research deals with the physical culture that flourished in colonial Bengal, 19th century onwards. So you can start. Over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Shanchali. Firstly, thanks a lot for inviting me for this lecture. Thank you, Shanchali, and thank you, and Narratives. Um, uh, um, as she was telling you that I have been doing this research on physical culture. Um, the thing is, the idea of physical culture, what is actually physical culture? Uh, Before I start talking about my work, let me give you a brief idea of what physical culture is. Um, it's not a very complicated thing. It is basically physical exercises of various kinds. And in my paper, I am generally, my focus is on the so called indigenous physical culture that was practiced in uh, uh, during this um colonial period, and I will say late colonial period. um, and this is my topic, Brawn and the Bhadromahila through times, Sarala Debi and Ila Mitra. Now, the idea of physical culture, as I was telling you, let me share my screen. Shantali, can you help me share the screen? Because I have a few pictures to show, basically, nothing else. Um, Yeah, thank you very much. So, this is my topic, Brawn and the Bhadromahila through times. Now, the interesting thing about physical culture, uh, as I have been seeing over a period of time, that this this is centered around mainly um, how men can develop a muscular physique, how uh, uh, if I start from the very beginning, that the colonizers actually they stereotype the Bengali middle class Hindu male, um, or as we say in Bengali, the Bhadro look, as effeminate, as they as having very sedentary lifestyle. They are not capable for martial activities. They are not a martial race, and I mean they are basically a class suited for clerkship. Um, this is very common sort of idea. Those of us who have already studied history a bit, we know how Macaulay tried to create a Clark class, basically. So this is where my thesis starts. But here, my topic is a bit different from uh, what the central theme of my thesis is. Um, as we talk about Brawn as a norm, it is widely associated with a male identity. We are generally, whenever we think of a masculine uh, physique, we think of, uh, you know, uh, I mean, we have at present we have like six packs and bulging biceps and whatnots. Normatively, brawn is associated with the male identity. Um, we can very easily picture a man with muscles, but the idea of brawn on the female is something of a complicated uh, uh, issue. The connection of female identity uh, and the bulging muscles is still frowned upon. And I mean, even in the 21st century, we are not quite free of that prejudice where it is said that women should have a specific type of figure, of course, catering to the male gaze. And it is not a very comfortable thing, I will say, because um, the idea of this actually came from a picture I have seen on Facebook, and I would like to show you the picture. Just a second. Um, yeah. So this is a picture of a Victorian strong woman. Um, I don't really know how far they were accepted at that point of time, but what I saw on Facebook is that on social media is that a lot of a very uncomfortable sort of comments. I mean, it's not only people who are who do not subscribe to so-called progressive ideas. Even the so-called progressive people are having a bit of difficulty in swallowing this thing, and they fail to find the beauty in this picture. So they made a lot of ridiculous comments, and as the trolls comment, it is very common to sort of make fun of women and all. Uh, so this is Victorian women, but we are talking about the Bengali Bhadromahila. So let's come back to our own country. And what so women, they have been normatively described as fragile creatures. They're compared with flowers, they're compared with moonbeams, but never compared with sort of they're never um, compared with something very strong and very hardy. So even in the world of ideas, when we talk about women of steel, uh, it is actually the strength of character, and it has nothing to do with their bodily strength. Because as I was saying, that a strong body has been historically associated with the male identity, while the female body, and as we look through the lenses of the male gaze, serves as an object of desire, frail and pure. Uh, Purity is, of course, another concern of patriarchy, but in this talk, I don't think I will have the time to discuss the idea of purity and how women became impure. That should be a completely different discussion. So I'm not going into that. And this frail and beautiful women are feminine, and they shouldn't be like men, manly women. I don't know. When we were growing up, we had a very famous tennis star, Martina Navratilova. And Martina Navratilova was often criticized for her very athletic build. And she was called like, I have heard this in my surrounding, that she looks like a man. Very recently, we have this kind of apprehension among people, uh, this sort of the case of Duti Chand. We have already heard the case of Duti Chand, and again, the case of Duti Chand has been very well dealt by Dr. Payashni Mitra. So I'm not going into that, but again, the idea of a very physically athletic kind of build um, leads to this question: is she really a she, or is there something else in that? We have seen the whole Duti Chand affair, and I think there was another athlete. I have forgotten her full name. She was Pinky something, I guess. So uh, these kind of things are very common even today, at least in India. So it is, we can say that Brawn and Bhadromahila, they are, I mean, completely apart from each other, completely different things from each other. We cannot make a connection between these two ideas. Um, so when this is 21st century, right? So if we go back in time, say like 19th century, end of 19th century, and uh, the space we are talking about is Bengal, and this is a larger Bengal because there was no partition at that point of time. So the middle class Bengali Hindu male, they have affinities ascribed to them by the colonial rulers, as I was saying earlier, and interestingly, this is an idea to which they also partially subscribe. Sociologist George Yancey, in his article "Colonial Gazing: The Production of Body as a quote unquote other," um, he writes, and I would like to quote him here. He says, though of course it is in a different context, he's speaking about the black body. um, what he is saying that um colonial domination required a whole way of thinking, a discourse in which everything that is advanced, good, and civilized is defined and measured in European terms. This is very common, even in our country and in all colonial countries, as far as we are concerned. Um, so what he is trying to say that um, in short, there is a violent geospatial dimension of colonial territorialization and a violent form of psychocultural territorialization, both of which was interwoven. The latter is designed to place the colonized in a pathological relationship to him or herself. This is accomplished not simply through geospatial modalities of incursion and usurpation, but also through the process of getting the colonized through process of ideological inculcation to internalize the stereotypic image in terms of which they are depicted by the colonizer. Now, even though this is about the black identity and the black body, this is also very much applicable to our theme. And it is argued that this acceptance was ostensibly manifested in the Bhadralok's many attempts at reimagining a golden era of traditional indigenous tradition. I mean, when we talk about this indigenous thing, this is very interesting, but I don't really have the time to sort of go beyond this the structure of my lecture today. But let us for the let us for mm, I mean let us take this let us keep this word indigenous within quote, because there is a lot of issue, there is a lot of problematization that happens within this sphere of indigenism. So this is the situation, and they tried, they sort of argued that they had a golden tradition of virile and masculine manhood, which was destroyed with the coming of the colonial rulers, and it has to be reawakened at the face of colonial assumption of lack of so-called manliness and the non-martial qualities. And accordingly it is manifested in these physical culture spaces, especially akharas and bayam shamitis. Now akhara is something, I think a lot of people should be very familiar with the idea of akhara. Akhara is something which can be a place where physical activities are performed by um, pehelwans. In North India, these days, even during this time, even at present, we see a lot of akharas. Even if you go to the ghats of Gonga, you will see a few akharas. And once I was there and I asked them that, uh, uh, do Bengali guys also come here? So completely, they were completely taken aback by the question, and they looked at it at each other, and they started laughing and said, no, no, Bengali guys never come here. They are too lazy to do all this. So this is still the this is still the stereotype which is very common in India. So and akhada is also, it can also be a space where it's like a monastery where religious people can congregate and they can leave. That is also another kind of akhara, but here we are dealing with the physical culture space. um, so now in this imagined golden dream of masculine tradition, uh, the Bhadromahila did not secure a place. This is very common because when you are talking about manliness, it is obvious that you will not be interested uh, uh, in sort of talking about women. Okay. While we were talking about the effeminess of the babus of the Bengali male, I found a few photochitros. None of this I own, of course. These are all sourced from internet. And here we see a babu who is being beaten by a woman, and that is like that is even today, that is something that actually hurts the male ego most. And it is not only a satire on the babu who is subservient and who is given, I mean, he's dedicating himself to this woman. It is also a very cynical take on the woman who are apparently becoming masculine, and they're becoming so domineering that they're beating up their partners, their uh, you know husbands and whatever. So also another caricature of this babu I found on the internet. See, the this is actually not a very old Pottochitro, but the style is like a Pottochitro. And here we see a babu who is very dandy and foppish with very well designed um, uh, kurta and long hair, which is also again a sign of effeminacy. And he's so much of a coward that he is um, riding on a lamppost because there are two street dogs on the streets. So this is also this is the kind of image building that was done during this period. When one has to revive their image, one would do is they will create a golden period where the Bengali men used to be very strong, and they used to eat a lot, they used to exercise a lot, they could kill a tiger single-handedly, that sort of stories. Um, and the as far as the women are concerned, we would find some lamentation in the domestic manuals, or in the periodicals of that time, about the declining health of the women in general. And why that is important? Because they are giving birth to very frail offspring, and even there was a very high rate of infant mortality, which is a cause of concern for the people who are aspiring to be a free nation, that this kind of frail and half dead kids will grow up to be another set of frail generation, and finally the generation will the class will be wiped out. That kind of sentiment was there. And it is always said that the modern women has a weaker foundation, a weaker physical constitution uh, than her predecessors. We have seen Bonkim Chandra talking about this in his Nobina and Probina. And Bharati Rai has also quoted a sort of dialogue between a grandmother and her granddaughter. This is written by the poet Kamini Roy. It is, of course, a fictionalized debate. So I'll just read this one. The grandmother is saying, men and women are different from one another and are mutually complementary. How can there be absolute equality between them? You are a mother, a wife, a sister, the nerve center of the home. If you get involved in the sordid business of the outside world, you will lose your femininity. Now, the granddaughter is saying the young generation does not accept the doctrine that a woman's only destiny is wifehood and motherhood, nor that her only place is in the home. Why should a woman be confined to home and denied her rightful place in the society? Women of today desire, without fear or inhibition, all round self development. Now, this all round self development is an important point, because when we are looking at educational institutes and sort of advices for the Bengali class, we see this emphasis on an all-round development, because it is generally believed that Bengalis are highly intellectual people, but they lack the physical stamina. So there is an emphasis on all-round development, which means there will be you have to study, and you also have to take a few sort of exercises to make yourself healthy. Uh, mm, it is also argued that the women of the older times were more fit and healthy, because they used to take up all sorts of domestic activities, and that provided them the required amount of exercise, which these modern women who are well read and well versed in sort of literature and whatnot, they're too lazy to clean their houses and wipe their courtyards and do things like that provides them the exercise. So the Bhadromahilas were often given a lot of advices, that they should pick up a few physical exercises, and it is very important the kind of physical exercises they are supposed to pick up, like brisk walking or gardening. something that will not ruin their feminine nature, that will not make them muscular, that will not make them quote unquote manly. So this idea now, just one thing I want to mention over here is that the quotation I was reading from Kamini Roy, that was her work published in 1924. Now let us go back about 20 to 30 years, and we can take up our first protagonist, who is Sarala Ghoshal, and after marriage she became Sarala Debi Chaudhurani. And Sarala Ghoshal, in every imaginable way, was an antithesis to the construct of this ideal Bengali woman. Now, Sarala Ghoshal comes from a very privileged background. She was the daughter of Swarnakumari Devi. Swarnakumari Devi is, of course, the sister of Rabindranath Tagore, and she was a literature, and she was also a journalist who edited the periodical Bharati for a long time, and who started Shokhi Samite, which is perhaps one of the first voluntary women's organization in 1896. So Swarna Kumari Devi had a lot of liberty, which normal regular women of Bengal did not have. And Swarna Kumari Devi was married to Janakinath Ghoshal, who was an early nationalist and a member of the Indian National Congress. So Sarala grew up in a very privileged household, with nationalism imbibed in her thoughts from the very beginning. She is also someone who completed her graduation in physics, and she's at that time she was the only one who did that. And Sharola, because of this privilege, and she could also go out of her house and try to earn her own livelihood. Though she did not need the money, but she needed that independence. That idea of independence appealed to her. Oh, but that is not directly related to our work. But let's come back to this. So she actually grew up in a household which was kind of progressive. We know about a lot of women from that household, who brought about a number of changes in the way. Okay, so just one picture. You have seen this picture of this very cowardly, foppish man, and now we see this picture of a bodybuilder, a very, very famous bodybuilder who's Gobor Goho. Um, and we see the kind of strength he has. Again, we are not going into details. So let's move on to Sarala Devi, Sarala Ghoshal or Sarala Chaudhurani. Now, here we see a picture of her in a dress of graduation. So she attended her graduation ceremony, it seems. Even if she did not attend it personally, she had her picture clicked. So she is, of course, from a very privileged background, and as I was saying, the Tagore family had the women of the Tagore family had a lot of uh, new things. We talk about Ganada Nandini Devi and her sartorial experiments. We have already talked about Swarna Kumari Devi. So Sarala is not a Sarala does not come from a very common household. This was, of course, a very important point in our work, because I would like to see that uh, the women we are talking about were actually the product of their own age. So Sarala was very patriotic in nature. The idea of nationalism, she had grown up with the idea of nationalism. So once she was returning from somewhere on a train, and there she saw someone being an Englishman, or maybe an European man, misbehaving with native people, and she was very, very annoyed with this. So she this thing stung her so hard that she started writing in Bharati, uh, and inspire. She was under the impression that she could inspire the Bengali men through her writing. So she wrote um articles such as Byam Chorcha, or physical exercises, practice of physical exercises, Biliti Ghushi Bonam Deshi Ki. Now again, Deshi is indigenous, so we are again talking about this idea of indigenous physical exercise. Um, and these articles, of course, reached the target audience, and they were very well received. And it was believed that a lot of men were very impressed, and they said that with this kind of inspiration, we should really go ahead and practice physical culture and build up our health and whatever. um, but Chorola was not very satisfied with this amount of effort. But she was a doer. There are dreamers and there are doers. She was a doer. So Chorola, she started actively participating in the discourse of this construction of a golden age of valor and physical prowess of the Bengali men. In order to do this, what she did was she initiated a tradition of worshipping weapons on the third day of the 5 day long festivities that Bengalis observe every year, marking the return of the goddess Uma, or Durga, to her paternal family. And Uma, though Uma is actually like a daughter to the Bengalis, the other side of Uma, the Durga side, uh, she the as Durga, she also slayed the demon king Mahishasura, and Sharola realized that this is the during the Durga Puja. It is a perfect time to inspire the Bengalis to revive their martial tradition. So the third day, third or fourth day, uh, which is called Oshtomi in Bengali, she renamed it as Birashtami. And Birashtami, if roughly translated, it means the day of the braves. In 1902, she started this ritual of worshipping weapons on the day of Ashtami, and she didn't rename the day as Birashtami. In 1903, she explored the local history of the region and found a zamindar by the name of Pratapaditya Roy, or Pratapaditya Ray, who it was believed that successfully stalled the forces of Delhi uh, from capturing his independent fief or whatever. So she started Protapaditya Utsav, uh, glorifying and reimagining the bravery of this specific local zamindar. Um, Interestingly, her uncle, her maternal uncle, the illustrious Rabindranath Tagore, had written a novel called Bou Thakurani's Heart, where he had shown Protapaditya in a very negative light. He had shown that Protapaditya was a cruel and sort of undemocratic kind of a ruler. And there was a public spat between these two. Public spat, not in the sense of public debate, but the letters they exchanged, the niece and the uncle, it showed that Rabindranath being very unhappy about this glorification of Protapaditya. Anyway, Sarola was not to be stopped by even her illustrious uncle. Um, Next, what she did was she started an akhara, which I was talking about a bit earlier. Um, uh, Let me show. Yeah. So this is a picture. This is a very old picture of an akhara where you can see vaguely people fighting, and then there are people who are posing, and you will see the kind of dress they're wearing, and the kind of hairstyle they sport. This is very different from the so-called normal middle class men of Bengal. So she started this akhada, and she also commissioned a man called Professor Murtaja to teach the indigenous physical culture to the young boys who are mostly, if not completely, Hindus. I was reading it somewhere that initially a few Muslim boys also came to those akharas, but then they found that the akharas were driven by Hindu philosophy and Hindu ideology, which was very uncomfortable for them, and they did not pursue it further. I am not talking about the Muslim men, because their experience is completely different, and that should take another thesis, to another dissertation to describe and work on that experience. So I'm only concentrating on the Hindu group. And now this Professor Mortaja, he has a very interesting history. He used to teach Lathi Khela in Pulin Bihari Datta's Akhara. And eventually, Pulin Bihari Datta became very suspicious of the man. And in his autobiography, Pulin Bihari's autobiography, we will see there is a kind of demonization of Professor Murtaja, which perhaps is related to his religion. Also, since we are talking about Pulin Bihari actually brought Professor Murtaja to um, uh, uh, Sarola Devi. But Pulin Bihari, again from his autobiography, we see there's a lot of reservations on his part as to the role of women as far as this physical culture thing is concerned. And he was not ready to grant them a space in his militant groups, because he thought that he had a picture of women as seductress, which is a very common picture. And even in the North Indian akharas, till this day, that kind of picture is present. So uh, though he had his reservations, he actually helped Shorola to set up in her own akhara. And Shorola also helped a lot of youth groups to set up different akharas. She provided them monetary help. She gave inspiring speeches. She even showed a certain amount of physical culture that she has learned. So now this is all for the men. This brings us to the question as to did Shorola also take a similar initiative for young women? It has been found that she herself used to dress up as a warrior goddess in warm armor and enter the scene brandishing a sword. So she sort of gave the impression of being a reincarnation of a Hindu warrior goddess, who is also mother to this Hindu men. And this act of her gathered a lot of praise from the nationalist Hindu men. However, as Dr. Payushni Mitra pointed out in her article, Reinforcing Difference, the History of Women's Involvement in Physical Activity in India, published in India International Center Quarterly, Volume 44, number 3 by 4, uh, winter 2017 to spring 2018. Uh, Payushni Mitra, she shows that though Sarala devoted most of her married life towards the upliftment of women of India, um, uh, and had a very strong faith, to quote Dr. Mitra, had unflinching faith in the power of women. She never wished them to pursue physical culture. This is very interesting. The power of women to her meant the power of mind, of spirituality, which were often considered a sphere where Indians were far ahead of their colonizing masters. I'm not again going into details of this, but let me just put it like this, that Partha Chatterjee, in one of his articles, has shown that there was a neat distinction of two spheres, one material and one spiritual. Indians or the Bengalis defeated in the material sphere by the Western powers, they reclaimed their supremacy in uh, reclaimed in the sense they believe they have reclaimed their supremacy in the spiritual section. And it was believed that the spiritual section is also the domestic section, which is also again related to women. um, this has its own problems, and I will not go into detail of that. But it's if you study the history of physical culture, it is not very easy to so neatly divide the spiritual and the material into watertight compartments. When Shorola says that women are powerful, she does not mean women are physically powerful. In fact, she means quite the contrary. She thinks that in the mundane or materialistic sphere, uh, women need the help of men. Uh, to so uh, in she concludes that women are the driving force, women are the inspiration, while men are machines. Uh, it is not showing men in a very good light, but that's exactly what she wrote. This is where I would like to quote Dr. Mitra, the uh, article I was talking about. So let me quote a bit from Dr. Mitra's article. Um, Dr. Mitra says that uh, mm, uh, they're as I was saying, they are the driving force. She actually wrote uh, uh, an article called Romani Karjo, or the duties of the women, which in which she clearly stated this, that the women are the driving force, while uh, the men are the machine which has to be driven. Uh, so what Dr. Mitra is saying is there is a strange denial of the female body, as if it is incapable of demonstrating extraordinary physical strength. The one reference to the necessity of physical exercise for women is an account of her introduction of dance to middle class households. Now, dance again is a very problematic territory. Dr. Oishika Chakraborty has written a lot about it, and I'm not going into that detail, but um, a lot has been written about the perception of the middle class of dance. And so dance was basically known as an inferior sort of physical culture, and it is also believed to be morally uh, uh, degrading. So, not many middle class families were very interested in teaching dance to their offsprings, especially women. So I quote here, this is from Sarala Debi's article. Today, in every house, in every school, at every meeting, girls dancing is a common sight. In those days, even taking a couple of rhythmic steps on stage was frowned upon. Once, with a lot of trepidation, I taught some young girls a bare semblance of rhythmic movements while Rabindranath's lyric, "Come, dear friend, let us dance together, holding hands and singing songs." This is Ayatabu Shahajuri. So, she is commenting on the fact that there has been a change in the mindset, and girls are being allowed to dance. And let me also say that even when Rabindranath wanted to introduce dance in Shantiniketan, he had to be very cautious. And because dance again was she is seen as an effeminate pursuit. So he had to be very cautious, and he had to name it as rhythmic drill or something like that. So this is what Sharola Devi is saying, that there has been a change in the mindset, and that is reflected in people taking up dance. The point here is, mm, if I take Dr. Mitro's point that there is a strange denial of the female body, which is absolutely true. uh, I believe it is important to situate Sarala Devi in the early 19th century, the period she belonged to. And if we situated her there, she may not came across as a very regressive sort of person who thought women are lesser than men, because um, as I was reading out from Kamini Roy's fictionalized account, it was published as late as 1924, and this was 1956. So a lot has changed during this time. Um, Her ideology, she might not seem a staunch feminist to many of us, but her ideology was more steeped in nationalism than anything else. So that is exactly why in the article called Ramoni Karjo, she is talking about how women should help the society to move forward. And this also highlights why she and many of her contemporary men were emphasizing on practicing physical culture for the male section of the society only. And for that section who otherwise do not engage much in manual activities, so they were pushing for that. They were not pushing for physical exercises of women, because for them women were still someone whose duty is mostly in the domestic sphere, and whose duty is to bear children. And if for bearing children she needs to improve her health, then so be it. But beyond that, there should be no idea of women exercising for the sake of exercising. So There is a limitation we can see. But this limitation should not take away the credits from this Bengali Brahmo Bengali Bhadromahila. And because she was perhaps the most prolific political nationalist leader of her time, which is very evident from her activities and her writings. And even after her marriage with Rambhuj Datta Chaudhuri, who was a nationalist himself, um, she continued to work for the betterment of women. Uh, sh- uh, uh, I wonder if you were aware of this, that she was so. She impressed Mahatma Gandhi so much that Mahatma Gandhi used to call her his spiritual wife. A lot of gossip has centered around this, but uh, we will not go into those gossips. But of course, Mahatma Gandhi has a very high regard of her. Yet, in his letters, we will find that he is continuously patronizing Sarala Devi. He is rebuking her for her conducts and how she presents herself and everything else. So, as we don't know how Sarala Devi replied, uh, we cannot really say that if she fought with this very epitome of nationalism, the man who is the epitome of nationalism at that point of time. But from Gandhi's letters, we do find this. Um, Later on, Sarala Devi had charted a course for an ideal school of for women. When she's charting the course for the um, mm, um, ideal school for women. Uh, she's saying that uh, a girl's life should not only be confined in the domestic space. Yet, in the same breath, she described women as helpless and always needing the support of men. Now, there is this contradiction in her character, which is also, I will argue, is a reflection of her time and her background. Uh, it might sound convoluted to the readers of today, but if we take a socio-economic background, let us not forget that she comes from a very privileged background, and she comes from a Brahmo background, which it is believed that Brahmos were more liberal than the Hindus, the Sanatani Hindus. She even advocated some delicate exercises, the emphasis on delicate, to be included in the curriculum of the girls, which will promote the grace of figure. Now, again, we're coming to this prism of male gaze, where the grace of figure of woman is important. By due exercises of all her limbs should be exercised, but not to that extent that she grows muscles and everything. So, Dr. Mitro has shown in her article that though in the first 2 decades there is an emphasis on physical culture for boys, especially, it eventually died down as the century progressed. Hence, it will be an undue expectation that Chorola Devi, who had made efforts for this the initial stage of physical culture, uh, she did not mention anything for the women. Indeed, it took a long time even for her successors to advocate for physical exercise for girls in schools. Even in Payashni Mitro's account, we see the poet Kamini Roy was perhaps one of the first women to root for physical exercises for girls. Um, uh, Yet it did not become norm in a day. It took a lot of militant revolutionary women to take a keen interest in physical activities at par with their male counterparts. Um, Several names come to mind, like Komalada Shukto, Leela Rai or Leela Nag after marriage, Monikuntala Sen, Kalpana Dotto, and most remarkably, our second protagonist, Ila Mitro. So Ila Mitro is a completely different case as far as our study is concerned. Ila Mitro, um, generally, we talk about her role in the Tebhaga movement, the sharecropping movement that was that took place in Bengal. But beyond that, we know that she played a very important role in that movement as the leader of the movement, and went through unimaginable torture under police custody. She was repeatedly raped, and a hot egg inserted in her vagina, which is gross to say the least. And then she was also beaten up and tortured in every possible sense: mental torture, sexual torture, physical torture, everything. She bore everything. Uh, but beyond that, we don't really talk about Ila Mitro that much. Um, Modhulagna Haldar, she was a junior in my JU days. She's now a doctoral student in Canada. She has written a piece on Ila Mitro where she laments that uh, we don't give due credit to this trailblazing kind of woman. Her work is titled Ila Mitra, the athlete and revolutionary Tebhaga Andolon leader. So she is saying that since she was more associated with the leftist politics, she was a member of CPI, we tend to forget her role. And here it is very important that I would like to state that um, after the left front government came to power, she was never given a ticket to contest while she was an MLA during um, the Congress government. So let's talk about Ila Mitro now. Um, uh, while we are talking about women's involvement in physical culture, it is very important that we should talk about Ila Mitro. It is almost obligatory to look into her case. She was an athlete extraordinaire who turned into a peasant leader and then turned into an MLA, as I was saying. And all through her life, she was involved with leftist politics, though she never got the chance to represent her constituency as some minister or whatever. And if I may say so, that she's more strongly remembered in Bangladesh, which was the place where she fought for this Tebhaga movement, than in modern day West Bengal. Um, Ila Mitra was born Ila Shen on October 18, 1925. More than 20 years after Sarala had started her inspirational journey in reviving the physical health of Bengali men. Now, Ila and Sharola were as unlike as chalk and cheese. Why I'm saying this? Because Ila, she comes from a middle class background. Sharola came from a very elite and privileged background. Um, but Ila's family was also a progressive one. And uh, uh, um, from a very early age, Ila displayed a natural talent for athleticism. Unlike Leela Roy, who later became Leela Nang, and Monikantala Sen or Preeti Lata Vaddedar or Kalpana Dotto, she did not get initiated to physical culture through nationalistic movement. It was the other way around. She was a gifted athlete, and she she was um, she received a great deal of encouragement from her father, who was a government employee, Nagendra Singh. He used to accompany her to swimming practices and track competition. This is a very novel factor in 1925 onwards. Say 1930s and 40s, it is a very novel factor that a middle class man is encouraging his daughter to take part in swimming competition, in basketball matches, in tracks, and whatever. Ajay Rai, a professor from Dhaka, in his article on Ila Mitra published in October 2015 in, I think, Daily Star, he published his work in Daily Star, I guess. Um, uh, 1 minute, let me check. I don't want to give you the wrong name. I keep forgetting the name, so this is a problem. Yeah, Debi Star. He is saying that Ila Mitro was a very well-known athlete of this period. He wrote that in the 1930s, she was a star in the world of sports in Bengal. And indeed, she was a bright star. Sohini Chattopadhyay, she writes in another article, and I quote here, from 1937, she, as in Ila Mitro had, Ila Sen at that point of time, had been an almost regular presence on the sports pages of Bengali and English newspapers in Calcutta for her triumphs on the track. The picture you can see over here is a very young Ila Sen, uh, and all her trophies and shields and medals. Um, Sohini Chattopadhyay says that there are 47 of them. I haven't counted, but yeah, that is some achievement for a Bengali woman, a Bengali girl in the 1930s. This is not a very common occurrence, that we may say. So her athleticism was very well known in Bengal. And again, I quote Sohini Chattopadhyay. 1 second. Let me. Sohini Chattopadhyay, she writes, in 1937 and 1938, the sports club Jatiyo Jubo Sangho awarded her successive junior championship titles for girls in Bengal. In 1938, the Bengali journal Sochitro Bharat featured the 13-year-old Ila in a collage of senior sports achievers that included the British Indian hockey team, a mountaineer setting off for Tibet, and a 10-mile walking champion. So she was actually in an elite company, as we may say. She was only a 15-year-old Bengali girl studying in Bethune School when her father was um, uh, told that she was being considered as a member of the Indian contingent to 1940 Helsinki Olympics. But as it is, the Helsinki Olympic never took place. It got cancelled due to the Second World War. And it is also true that we don't find any official correspondence about this. But whoever has written about Ila Mitro has mentioned this, so I guess it is a fact. Ila Mitro, from a Bengali sports prodigy, she practically changed tracks. In 1940-41, when she was studying in Bethune College, she became attracted to the Marxist ideology, like a large section of her contemporary youth, men and women, and she joined the Communist Party of India. Simultaneously, she also enrolled in the Mohila Atmaraksha Samiti, or MARS, as it is said. Uh, and the MARS is a very important organization for the leftist women, and it played a very important role during the famine of Bengal, the Great Famine. Apart from that, it also taught self-defense to women, and it also tried to make women self-reliant economically. They used to sell handmade goods from rural women or marginal urban women, and give them the money so that they can also contribute something to the um, household. Monikuntala Sen was a very important member of it, and Ilamitra also became a member of this organization. In 1945, she married Ramindranath Mitra. Now, this Ramindranath Mitra, he is a very interesting character because he comes from a zamindar family, but was so inspired by the communist ideology. He organized a communist movement in Malda. So actually, this was a very good. What I can say, this was a good fortune for Ilamitro, Ilashen at that point of time. Ilamitro was married to someone who subscribed to the same ideology as her, but uh, soon Ilamitra became the more prominent face of communist politics in the area. Their ancestral home was in a place called Nachol in Rajshahi in Bangladesh at this point of time. And she was called Nachole Ranima, the queen mother of Nachol. So, this journey from a prospective Olympian to a communist leader, uh, it is a very interesting journey, as we may say. Her relation with the Santals and other marginal people who lived nearby was one of never-ending dedication from both the side. She was always there for their needs, and when she was arrested in the charge of killing and killing a police officer, uh, mm, her loyal comrades were brought into the police station, and they were beaten badly. Some people were also killed, and there was this only one thing that was asked from them, that this is Ilamitra and her husband, in a later period, of course. They asked, the police repeatedly kept telling her comrades, who were these indigenous people, these marginalized tribes and everything. They kept repeatedly asking them to name Ilamitra as one of the chief conspirators, which they did not do, even after some of them actually died due to this beating, due to this torture that they had to undergo. But they kept mum. And then the police started torturing Ilamitro, and Ilamitro was so emotionally charged with the bravery, with the kind of loyalty her comrades had so shown to her, that she also decided not to confess anything. um, and she had to face a lot of troubles, as I was saying, that she had to undergo repetitive rape in police custody, and so much so that she fell ill, and she had to be moved from the jail premises to hospital, and so on. So, this is a very interesting story indeed. And as far as physical culture goes, these two women, they form a very, um, I might say, dialectically opposite kind of characters, who were all again. Um, very progressive for their age. Yet, for Shorola at least, we have seen a number of a sort of a lot of contradictions she carried within herself, which is not a very uncommon thing, because the male leaders of the period had a very similar kind of contradiction within themselves. And as far as Ilamitro was concerned, Ilamitro was more staunchly communist. I don't think she called herself a feminist, but she is most definitely, she deserves to be a feminist icon in Bengal, in the history of Bengal, not only because of her role in the Tebhaga movement, but also the her role in physical culture. I was reading a blog by her grandson Ritendranath Mitro, in which he writes that all through his childhood he remembered that his grandmother used to get up really early in the morning, and then uh, did some freehand exercises, and then went to swimming. This is even after she was so badly injured, and she had to suffer a lot. During the partition, she had to face a lot of political situations, which made things complicated for her. Even after that, she continued to be the athlete she used to be in her early age. And she was this communist woman who would not listen to her comrade and husband, even during her old age, and will travel by a crowded minibus rather than by a taxi. And she thought, and she explained that she was able to survive the whole trauma, and the whole the trauma, as in the physical and the psychological trauma, due to her what you can say, due to her continuous engagement with physical exercise, which she continued even during the last phase of her life. Riten writes that she used to take a cold shower, walked out for a half an hour, and then went for a swim even when she was 70. And she also did certain domestic works, like doing the grocery and stuff, and the political works. She was involved with sports council, party office, Mohila Shamiti, and such likes. uh, so, as we can say that these two women, they are very different sort of women, and they come from different backgrounds, and they had different ideological turns. While Sharola was mostly nationalist, uh, Ila was more of a communist than anything else. But they both, as far as the history of physical culture in Bengal goes, they occupy a very important position, and everyone working on these two, or working on this area, should really examine their roles as far as physical culture is considered. So that's it. And thanks again, Shanchali, for this wonderful opportunity that you gave me. And I have left this last slide that says Bangladesh remembers, of course, a take off on a spin off on Game of Thrones. In this country, we don't really remember Ilamitru that much, but Bangladesh does remember her. Kavita Punjabi has also written about it in details.
Thank you so much for that very interesting, informative talk, Shantanidhi. I remember you speaking on physical culture at that Xavier's conference we both attended right before the pandemic broke out. Um, it was so interesting, and I really hope we can have you again for some
Oh, sure.
more aspects on
Sure.
this
Of
particular
course.
subject. Um, so this is going to remain archived, and you can share it with people if you want to. And
Hmm.
I'm sure this is going to be helpful to anyone who's interested in the subject.
I
Um,
really hope so.
and I mean, to know so much about Ila Mitra and Sarala Debi, and this particular uh, you know about physical
Aspect.
culture, and also the fact how from an athlete she becomes this communist leader, and the journey, the whole trajectory. It's so interesting. Thank you again for agreeing to speak today,
My pleasure.
and
My pleasure.
thank you so much. So I guess we could call it a day.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Shanjali.
My pleasure.